I wish everybody a wonderful Chodesh Tov, happy Chodesh of Elul, a month of Elul, which just started today. I am Rabbi Nathan Davidovich, speaking to you on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I'm going to talk about Parsha Shoftim, this week's Parsha, Torah portion. And I've entitled my little Devar Torah here as Parsha Shoftim, Don't Let Cats Dictate Your Future. Kind of a strange title. And in the month of Elul, this is the month before Rosh Hashanah. And as we are approaching Rosh Hashanah, our job is to engage in introspection, to see what kind of relationship have we had between ourselves, between our neighbors, and between God. There's a specific command in this week's Parsha, which I'm going to discuss. The command is, Tomim tiya im Hashem Elokecha. You shall be perfect or wholehearted before the Lord your God. I'm going to ask and try to answer three questions in this short lesson. First of all, the placement of this command. What precedes it? Preceding this command is the commandments not to listen to sorcerers, people who predict the future by saying this is an opportune time because of the stars, things like that. So the first question is, why is this command of being perfect before God placed right after these kinds of things, saying we shouldn't use these things to predict the future? And Rabbi Akiva says, what does this mean, predicting the future? He says, like you see a sign, a physical sign. He uses the sign of a deer crossing in front of you. I think that's in the Sifri. But in modern days, we see a black cat cross in front of us. What do we do when we see a black cat in front of us? Do we do something? Does it affect the way we live? Are we using that to sort of predict what might happen or be fearful of what might happen because of that? So I'm going to talk about why this command is placed right after that. And second, where the Torah tells us, be perfect with your Lord your God, how do we achieve that? And the third thing I want to discuss is, we have the Maimonides, Rambam, who lists all of the 613 commandments. This particular commandment of being perfect with God is not listed. Why is that? Let's try to talk about these things. First of all, let's look at what Rashi says. Rashi, the great commentator, says, you should walk with God with perfection. And depend on him. Don't seek into the future. Whatever happens to you, accept it with wholeheartedness, and then you'll be perfect. Rashi, the Meforshim also say that how do we become perfect with Hashem? By imitating the ways of Hashem. Just as we know that Hashem is merciful, God is merciful, we too should be merciful. Just as we know that God helps those in distress, we too should help those in distress, and so on. The Orach Chaim, Holy Orach Chaim, has a very interesting statement on this as to its placement. And he says, the commandment, you shall be wholehearted before the Lord your God. He says, because the previous sections dealt with a variety of magic which are often connected with religious beliefs, the Torah emphasizes that our relationship with God has to be a mutual relationship, an exclusive relationship between us and God. And many religions, many people believe that various terrifying phenomena in nature are a sign of what's going to happen. And therefore they result to means to foretell the future, looking at the stars and so on. But we're convinced that God always has our best interests at heart, and therefore we don't have to be afraid of any of these signs. It's interesting, this word tomim, perfection, is used to refer to three people in the Torah. It's used to refer to Noach. It says, Noach tomim lifnei Hashem. Noach was perfect before Hashem. It's used to refer to Avraham Avinu, to Abraham, and with Abraham it says, Tomim tiyeh Hashem. He also says, sorry for the word. It also refers to him as perfect. And also with Yaakov refers to as Ish Tam Yoshev Alim, a person who's perfect living in a Torah world, living in tents, a Torah world. And we get an example from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu saw in the stars that he's never going to be destined to have any children with Sarah. And Hashem showed him that the stars don't tell you what's going to happen. Hashem showed him just the opposite. So that's what the Or HaChaim says. It places this commandment after those things to let us know that we only can rely on Hashem and on nothing else. And that if we rely on Hashem, we're perfect with Hashem. Hashem does Midah connected Midah. Hashem deals with us as we deal with him. The third part of this question, of this lesson that I mentioned, is why is this not listed among the listing of the 613 commandments by Maimonides, by Rambam? And there's another command that's similar to this. We talked about it last week, I think. Maybe it's also in this Parsha. V'asisa tova hayashar. You should do what is upright and good before God. Doesn't tell us what the parameters of that are, just as it doesn't tell us what the parameters of this are. So the explanation as to why it's not listed is because doing what is good and upright before God, being perfect before God, depends on the individual. Not all of us are equal. We have different abilities, and we can serve God at the level that we can understand and the level that we can get to. Some who have a greater closeness to God, as it were, have a different level of being perfect with God. Others who have a more basic have their level. So it'd be impossible to list this as a commandment because it differs from every person. The key is when you're doing something, you must ask, is this going to be pleasing to God? If it's pleasing to God, if it's something you think God would want, not that you would want, but that God would want, then you can be Tomim im Hashem, perfect with God. As we start the month of Elul, as I said, today is Rosh Chodesh. Tonight and tomorrow we start saying an additional psalm, the psalm of L'David Hashem Ori. God is my light. It says, from who God is my light and salvation, from who should I fear? And it has in here the statement. It says, Achas shoalti me'es Hashem. There's only one thing I want from God. Shivti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai, to dwell in God's house all the days of my life. In other words, to come close to God, to be perfect with God. This particular psalm ends with the words, Kaveh el Hashem, hope to God. Chazak v'yamis libecha, be strengthened in your heart. And as my father Al Vasham would say, what that means is if you don't see God answering your prayers right away, but Kaveh el Hashem, don't give up, continue hoping in Hashem, and God will answer your prayers. I hope we take these messages to heart and come into Rosh Hashanah with the proper mindset. Thank you all for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I wish everybody a Chodesh Tov and a Shabbat Shalom.